What happens if you refuse to work for the CIA? It began on an ordinary morning, the kind history often chooses to disguise as something forgettable. The letter arrived without ceremony, stamped with a seal older than most modern institutions. Its words were polite, measured, carrying a weight that felt both official and strangely intimate. The Central Intelligence Agency invited the recipient to consider a role in service of the nation. There was no command, no pressure, only an opening into a world shaped by shadows and hidden duty. Yet the moment the envelope opened, the air shifted as if unseen eyes were studying the reaction. For decades, intelligence recruitment had carried an aura of myth, built from fiction and fear alike. Some imagined secret demands. Others pictured labyrinths of loyalty tests carved into cold walls. But in truth, the invitation was voluntary, a doorway that a person could choose to enter or ignore. Still, the mind rarely accepts simplicity when mystery stands behind a half-open curtain of history. The recipient felt the echoes of past eras, from the Cold War to modern crises etched into archives. Each era carried its own legends of recruits, spies, analysts, and those who simply walked away. To refuse was allowed, yet the very possibility of refusing stirred an emotion hard to name clearly. Was it courage, uncertainty, or the quiet knowledge that some paths reshape a life irreversibly? The letter rested on the table like a silent witness, its presence louder than any spoken request. Outside, the world moved as usual, unaware that one decision could bend a private destiny subtly. The invitation promised training, secrecy, and service, wrapped in the prestige of an iconic agency. But it also hinted at sacrifices, of anonymity, of peace, of the familiar rhythms of ordinary life. The recipient wondered how many before had stood at this threshold and felt the same tightening breath. History offered no answers, only fragments of stories buried under classified ink and fading memories. Some recruits accepted and disappeared into archives. Others refused and lived lives untouched by war. Yet all of them must have felt this moment, the strange gravity of choices made in complete silence. No recruiter waited outside the door. No pressure crept from government halls. Only the weight of meaning. The decision belonged solely to the individual, though meaning often feels heavier than obligation. In that stillness, speculation whispered louder than truth, crafting illusions of hidden consequences. The letter seemed to pulse with possibility, a thread tying the present to decades of covert history. The recipient traced its edges, imagining a life shaped by codes, missions, and unsung victories. But imagination also drew the outline of refusal, of stepping back, choosing another road entirely. What happens when one declines such an invitation? Would life simply continue unchanged and unnoticed, or would the absence of that path leave a quiet echo, a question lingering through future years? As dusk settled, the envelope remained unopened again, folded gently but unanswered all the same. Not because of fear, but because every choice requires its own moment, its own breath, its own stillness. And so the story began not with acceptance, nor refusal, but with a pause, deep, human, and unforgettable. In the days that followed, the invitation remained untouched, yet its presence shaped every quiet hour. What seemed at first a simple choice soon revealed layers traced through decades of intelligence lore. For in the world of espionage, even the right to refuse was wrapped in myth older than the Cold War. Whispers from past generations told of recruits who walked away and vanished into normal lives. Others claimed those who refused were watched, not by force, but by curiosity rooted in old caution. Yet the truth, buried beneath speculation, was more human and far less dramatic than legends suggested. From its earliest years, the agency operated on principles demanding voluntary service above all else. Laws passed after the Second World War ensured that no American could be compelled into secret work. Still, knowing this did little to lift the weight of history pressing against the edges of the decision. The recipient felt echoes of earlier eras, when national paranoia blurred the lines between myth and fact. During the mid-20th century, fear wrapped itself around institutions, fueling rumors of coercion. But as archives later revealed, most who declined simply returned to their old lives, untouched by shadow. Yet the stories persisted, carried by films, novels, and the imagination of generations raised on intrigue. And so the recipient stood at the intersection of truth and folklore, unsure which path memory favored. To refuse meant walking away from secrecy, identity shifts, foreign postings, and coded communications. It also meant stepping back from risk, danger, and the sacrifices that often reshaped families forever. The choice felt almost historical, as if each decision mirrored the past choices of unnamed predecessors. Those who accepted entered corridors where history was written in whispers and sealed in silent vaults. Those who refused left quietly, carrying only the knowledge that an invisible path had been declined. The recipient wondered which legacy was heavier, the burden of service or the burden of possibility lost. Even with full legal freedom, emotion complicates every crossroads touched by national significance. In quiet moments, the mind asks questions older than strategy, loyalty, or intelligence doctrine. Was it noble to step away? Or was it fearful? Was it wise? Or was it a hesitation masked as clarity? No training manual answered these questions, for they lived only in the hearts of those who decided. History offered neither judgment nor guidance, only the silent testimony of countless unknown choices. And as the final night of contemplation arrived, the invitation seemed to watch, patient and expectant. Not demanding, not threatening, merely waiting for a decision that would shape a life in unseen ways. In the quiet aftermath of contemplation, the decision to refuse settled gently, like dusk over old stone. There was no announcement, no ceremony, only a choice made in stillness, honest and quietly final. Yet the moment the refusal formed, a new question rose. What does it truly mean to step away from destiny? History rarely speaks of those who decline, for chronicles favor action over silence and duty over retreat. Still, behind every celebrated operative stood countless others who chose a different path deliberately. Some historians argued that these hidden decisions shaped the nation as much as any covert mission could, for each refusal redirected talent into science, diplomacy, academia, medicine, or quiet civic service. The recipient sensed this truth, though faintly, as if hearing an old lesson whispered through time. There was no punishment for declining, only a subtle shift, as though a possible future folded itself away. It felt like closing a door in a long corridor, one lined with unseen risks and uncertain triumphs. But closed doors cast long shadows, and the mind wandered through the space where that path once existed. What would life inside the agency have offered? Purpose? Danger? Anonymity? Perhaps even transformation? What would it have taken? Privacy? Predictable days? Oh, the comfort of being known without disguise. These unspoken costs lingered like the scent of rain on old archives, familiar yet impossible to describe. In earlier decades, particularly during the tense years of the Cold War, such choices carried weightier myths. Stories circulated of recruits who walked away and later wondered whether history had passed them by. Others found peace in a quieter life, embracing the freedom of stepping outside the shadowed world. The recipient felt caught between these legacies, neither regretting nor celebrating the decision yet. Life resumed with its ordinary rhythms, but the ordinary had changed, touched by the gravity of refusal. Frenans noticed a new stillness in the recipient's eyes, as if measuring time differently than before. Work continued, conversations unfolded, but a faint echo clung to every day. What might have been? This was not fear, nor doubt, but the subtle cost of turning away from a road that few are ever offered. It was the weight of opportunity, something history records not with ink, but with unanswered questions. And though no agency watched, no shadow followed, the recipient felt companioned by uncertainty itself. For choices, once made, become invisible companions, silent, loyal, and impossible to fully dismiss. As weeks passed, the envelope was finally tucked away, not discarded, but kept like a relic of possibility, a reminder that some paths vanish when refused, yet others begin precisely because one dares to refuse. In the weeks that followed the refusal, a new presence emerged, not from the agency, but from the world itself. Rumors began to drift through conversations, faint as dust yet sharp enough to stir unease in quiet minds. For decades, films and novels had painted haunting tales of surveillance trailing those who turned away. Stories claimed the agency watched all who declined, measuring their loyalty from distant, unseen corners. But history revealed no such doctrine. The myths rose not from policy, but from generations of imagination. Still, myths have power, and the recipient felt them pressing like cold fingers along the edge of thought. Some colleagues whispered questions, gentle but curious, about the opportunity that had been declined. Their words carried fascination, as if the refusal itself had become part of an unsolved historical puzzle. Public lore had long cast intelligence agencies as specters moving beneath the fabric of ordinary life. Even a simple invitation, once refused, seemed to invoke the presence of these imagined specters again. The recipient began noticing ordinary details: a car parked twice, a stranger lingering, a call unanswered. None of these moments held meaning, yet each one felt amplified by the echo of cultural superstition. Past generations lived through eras when national fear made every shadow seem connected to hidden power. During the mid-20th century, especially in the tense Cold War years, suspicion haunted daily life. Those old anxieties survived in stories, shaping how people viewed the agency and those it approached. The recipient understood this. Yet emotion rarely bows to logic when mystery shapes the edges of memory. A subtle tension grew, an internal one, not born from threat but from the imagination's restless nature. Every old legend resurfaced, quiet agents watching from afar, files opened and examined in secret rooms. Yet reality remained mundane. No visitor appeared, no letter followed, no inquiry reached the doorstep. Instead, the only observer was the recipient's own mind, weaving history and rumor into fragile shapes. Friends asked whether refusing such an institution brought consequences, gently probing with curiosity. The recipient answered truthfully, there were none, but still felt the weight of their searching eyes. It was as if society needed the myth, needed shadows to explain the mysteries of national power. The refusal had created a gap, and myths rushed to fill it, swirling like smoke in a sealed chamber. But in the quiet moments, truth emerged more clearly. The world remained unchanged, calm, and unaltered. No hidden message arrived, no distant figure appeared, only the lingering tension between fact and fiction. And, as these myths continued to circle, the recipient realized that sometimes fear is simply history's echo. Weeks drifted into months, and the refusal slowly settled into memory, softened by time yet never erased. Life resumed its familiar pace, but beneath its surface remained a quiet echo shaped by an unopened path. The envelope, tucked in a drawer, became both a relic and a reminder of a choice made in perfect solitude. History taught that decisions like this rarely alter nations, yet they often reshape the individuals who choose. The recipient began to sense the shift not in the world outside, but in the subtle geography of identity. Declining an invitation from a storied institution brought clarity, pride, and an almost fragile unease. For every path taken leaves behind another path untouched, humming with the energy of the unrealized. The recipient often wondered how many before had lived with this same quiet, symmetrical uncertainty. During past decades, especially in the tense twilight of the Cold War, similar questions echoed silently. Those who refused rarely spoke of their decision, yet their stories lingered in archives as faint footnotes. They lived ordinary lives, but carried the knowledge that history had once knocked gently on their door. The recipient now understood the gravity of that knowledge, its weight subtle yet unmistakable. There was no regret, only a deep awareness that some choices cast shadows longer than their moments. Friends eventually stopped asking about the opportunity, though curiosity lingered in their brief pauses. Still, the world around remained unchanged. No watchers, no whispers, no signals from unseen corridors. Reality proved quieter than myth, yet the mind often searches for mystery where none is truly found. One evening, while sorting old papers, the recipient held the envelope again, feeling its familiar pull. Its presence felt historical now, like holding a fragment of a story that never reached its second chapter. No agency marked the refusal, no consequences emerged, yet the invitation retained a strange kind of power, a power born not of secrecy, but of possibility, of what might have been had the choice tilted differently. The recipient imagined an alternate life shaped by codes, foreign streets, and unspoken loyalties, and just as quickly imagined the cost: privacy surrendered, calm abandoned, identity fractured by duty. It became clear that refusing had protected something elemental, though difficult to articulate fully. Freedom, perhaps, or the simple dignity of shaping one's own story without the weight of hidden missions. Yet even freedom carries shadows, and this one followed softly, not threatening, but profoundly symbolic. In the final understanding, the refusal was not an escape but a deliberate step into a different destiny. The recipient realized that history is not written only by those who serve, but also by those who decline. For each choice shapes the quiet architecture of a life, guiding it into spaces unseen by the world outside. As night settled, the envelope was placed back once more, sealed in darkness yet glowing with memory. The drawer closed gently, but the story did not truly end. It merely shifted into a deeper, quieter realm. For somewhere in the unseen folds of possibility, another version of the story continued, invisible and vast. And in that hidden version, the recipient walked a different road, one never taken, yet forever imagined. The final truth emerged like a whisper. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are born not from what we choose, but from what we refuse.